What's new in America's museums in this time of COVID? Socially distant exhibits, artfully done, of course, but while it's easy enough for a museum to say it's going to reopen safely during this new season, how they actually do it is the story Serena Altschul has to tell.
This year, the Metropolitan Museum of Art planned to celebrate its 150th anniversary.
The Metropolitan Museum of Art announced today that it is temporarily closing because of virus
However,
concerns.
2020 had other plans.
A reopening date has not been determined.
On March 13th, coronavirus forced the Met to close its doors. They wouldn't open again for another 6 months.
That was in some ways the hardest part of this, to close the museum at a time when people most needed the museum. For 150 years, we've been there for the community. In every other moment of national challenge or crisis, people have come to the museum for comfort, and we weren't able to offer that.
Daniel Weiss is the president and CEO of the Met.
Prior to this pandemic, we were closed, I think, for the longest period of time was about 3 days. Snowstorms, power outages, those things we can understand. But in the great pandemic of 1918, we were not closed. So this is off the charts new experience for everybody.
New for both museums and visitors. Masks, timed ticket entries, temperature checks, and plastic partitions have become the new normal.
Things do look different.
They do.
Spacers 6 feet apart and hand sanitizers.
Exactly right. This is the Cleveland Lloyd dinosaur.
Jason Cryan is director of the Natural History Museum of Utah.
So opening the doors in an indoor venue, we needed to make sure that we kept people separate, spaced apart. Instead of having people come in and explore on their own, we needed to be a little bit more proactive and help them navigate safely.
That meant figuring out how to make a child-friendly museum COVID-friendly, too.
So we have computer interactives, but we also have mechanical interactives like this, where one can use the stylus to turn part of the exhibit.
That's so nice.
And you want to try?
Yeah, very elegant.
Of course, there hasn't been a quick solution for everything. Some museums have had to postpone and even cancel long-planned exhibits. Others remain closed.
What you don't want to be is you don't want to be a petri dish, right? You don't want to be a place where people get sick. What you want to be is a place where people get well, emotionally and spiritually.
Lonnie Bunch is secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, which has only opened 5 of its 19 museums and its zoo.
I'm much more comfortable saying, even as we open, if the virus gets worse or if the numbers spike, we'll close. Because I think that's where we are. We have to be that nimble in order to protect the public.
And while reopening museums has been a challenge, keeping them open for the long term will be another uphill battle.
Over the period of this pandemic, we expect to lose about $150 million. We had to reduce our staff through voluntary retirement, layoffs, and furloughs by about 21%, just over 400 people. It was very painful, very difficult to do.
If this has caused such an effect and taken such a toll on the Met, what are other smaller museums going to do? How do they exist through this?
Well, frankly, you ask, I think, exactly the right question. I don't know. We're very fortunate that we will get through this, but not everyone will.
According to a study conducted by the American Alliance of Museums, 1/3 of museums may permanently close in the next year. Laura Lott is president and CEO of the Alliance, which represents 4,500 member institutions.
Most museums get 50% of their operating budgets from earned sources, so from ticket sales, special programming and purchases of tickets to those things, cafe and gift shop sales, event rentals.
And that all stopped.
And that all went to zero in March. Most predict that it's going to take months, if not years, for that kind of revenue to come back.
The Brooklyn Museum will sell 12 works of art to help ease financial pressure.
It's a deficit that has at least one museum considering what's long been taboo: selling parts of their collection to raise capital.
So are you already seeing museums closing their doors for good?
There have been several that have announced, the Speed Museum, the Annenberg Center for Photography. I'm afraid that we'll see more closures as the economy takes its time coming back.
As for the museums that do survive, Laura Lott says they're needed now more than ever.
They have weathered previous crises, recessions, and the Great Depression in many cases. And there is this intangible value to museums that people do appreciate. And I'm optimistic that the museums that do make it through this time will emerge stronger, more connected to their communities, and continue to be vital to the human experience.